Waiver wire winners for fantasy football heading into week 12. Taysom Hill in week 11, 8 catches for 50 yards on 10 targets, 7 rushing attempts for 138 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 41.52 fantasy points. 16 points back in week 9, 14.4 back in week 4. He is a unicorn, quote unquote, tight end, a true fantasy football cheat code. Of course, it happened against my Chicago Bears, but Christian Watson in week 11, 4 catches for 150 yards, 19 fantasy points. He had 67 and 68 receiving yard days back in weeks 3 and 6. We've historically seen receiving yard and touchdown upside out of Christian Watson. He's had a season that's been a bit banged up, so now that he's healthy, this is encouraging. So this one has an asterisk next to it because he's dealing with a shoulder injury, but Elijah Moore is rising. 12, 9, and 8 targets for 8, 3, and 6 catches for 85, 28, and 66 receiving yards the last 3 games. Fantasy scores of 16.5 and 18.6 within those 3 games, a touchdown in week 11. We are seeing flex upside potential attached to Jameis Winston. Adam Thielen should be nearing a return from injury. He finished with 137 targets, 103 receptions, 1,014 receiving yards, and averaged 13.6 fantasy points per game, which ranked 25th with Bryce Young just last year. I think he can return to a substantial role, especially with Deontay Johnson gone for the Panthers. Drake May has finished 3 weeks with 19-plus fantasy points across the last 6 games played. 3 weeks with multiple passing touchdowns, 282 passing yards in week 11, 95 rushing yards in week 9 are a combination of upside examples. This is a dual threat quarterback who can continue to improve as the season goes on. Marquez Valdez-Scantling in week 10, he caught all 3 targets for 109 yards, 2 touchdowns, 25.9 fantasy points. Then in week 11, he caught 2 of his 4 targets for 87 yards, a touchdown, and 16.7 fantasy points. The big play upside has translated well through the last 2 weeks for fantasy football, especially with the Saints' injuries. And then I want to mention Will Dissly, the tight end for the Chargers. 4 catches on 6 targets for 80 yards and a touchdown in week 11 for 18 fantasy points. Since the week 5 bye, Dissly has been targeted 5, 11, 7, 3, 6, and 6 times. Week 11 was the second time across the last 5 weeks Dissly has finished with 80-plus receiving yards as well. I added a couple more names to my top 12 waiver wire pickups of the week. They are in order of priority. Every league is different, so who is available in your league is probably different than who's available in my league. This is how I'd attack it, though.